those who can't join us live, because you can find these on our YouTube page and watch them later. So if you are doing that, thank you for watching, and please share with your friends. As we go through the presentation, please stay on mute until the end. We will have a Q&A, a live dialogue session where we invite you to join the discussion. But you can also put any questions that you have in the chat at any time. So just please put them in there for now so we can put a pin in it and make sure we get to those, which we'll get to as many as possible. Today's Lunch and Learn does offer a 1-hour AIA and APA continuing education credit. So AIA members, please put your member number and your name in the chat before the presentation ends so we can get that process for you. And APA members, you know you self-report, so please do that within 24 hours to receive credit. Larry will put his information in the chat now. He is our administrator of these programs, as well as our continuing education program. So if you have any questions, please feel free to correspond with him. We do hope that you are a member of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation, but if you're not familiar, the Florida Trust is the statewide preservation nonprofit that helps people see, experience, and save Florida's history and heritage. We preserve and share the rich architectural, historical, archaeological, and cultural heritage of Florida. And now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter and share a little bit about her before we get started. I'm delighted that Jaime Perkins is here with us today from the city of St. Augustine. She obtained her Master of Public Administration from the University of Phoenix in 2014 and serves as the Director of the Community Services Department for the city of St. Augustine. Since joining the city, I can attest to you that she has done a lot. She has acquired over $1 million in grant funding for the institutional rehab program of their CRA, as well as capital improvement projects for the redevelopment agency. She also revised the Lincolnville Community Area Residential Home Repair Program called the Fix It Up Program. And this awards qualified applicants with up to $100,000. These are individual property owners, $100,000 in grant funding for health and safety repairs to their home. She is also responsible for the re-implementation of the city's neighborhood grant program, where qualified organizations may be awarded up to $3,000 for small-scale community projects and initiatives. Most recently, Jaime led the charge in establishing the city's third community redevelopment area, the West City Community Redevelopment Area. She worked closely with staff, consultants, residents, and all stakeholders to complete a finding of necessity, a study required to determine if an area meets the state's criteria to be established as a CRA. She also completed the Community Redevelopment Area Plan, which is the document that's utilized to initiate revitalization efforts in that special district. And now I invite Jaime to take over and take you through her successes and lessons learned through this process. Welcome, Jaime. So glad to have you.
Good morning, Jenny Wolf. Thank you so much for having me. I've got to get my camera on here. There we go. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Jaime Perkins, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with the preservation, with the Florida Preservation. Oh goodness, what is the name of this organization? For today, I'll be sharing preservation opportunities with CRAs. We'll be talking a little bit about our Fix It Up program, but keep it historic, and some other opportunities that we've accomplished here in the city of St. Augustine CRA. So I am going to try to share my screen. All right, tell me if you can see the screen before I get started.
No. It's not coming through yet, Jaime.
No worries. Let's try it again here.
There we go.
All right. What about now?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Bingo.
All right, thank you so much. So today's presentation will highlight the City of St. Augustine CRA, our preservation efforts as it relates to the residential repair program Fix It Up, which is a very special piece of my heart here, and especially for Lincolnville, which is a historic African-American community here in St. Augustine. It's solely established for Lincolnville, and we'll talk a little bit about our adopted architectural guidelines, which are also specific to Lincolnville, and the success of the institutional rehabilitation grant program. So since joining the city in 2020, I've worked on some very exciting projects. I've collaborated efforts and developed partnerships with stakeholders with the intention to truly ensure that the redevelopment process had a positive effect on those impacted by the changes in their communities. I've done this by adopting this mantra. And the mantra is basically that redevelopment is going to happen, and it is our job to make sure that it happens in a meaningful way. If you've ever heard me do a presentation before, you've likely heard me say this. This is something that I stand by as we develop projects and programs within the communities that we serve. I truly believe that planning professionals have an obligation to be mindful and thoughtful about community changes, and I believe that we are directly responsible for for righting the wrongs of de jure practices in planning that has disenfranchised neighborhoods and communities. So on this slide, you'll see a QR code. You can take the time to scan it if you like, but where that QR code leads you is to an annual report. So community redevelopment agencies are required legislatively to publish a community redevelopment annual report each fiscal year. And this report basically outlines everything that we're working on or things that we have worked on within that fiscal year, and then of whatever our intention is for the upcoming fiscal year. So ironically, I titled last year's fiscal year report Meaningful Redevelopment. So I think that was very proper for today's presentation. So let's get into it. The Fix It Up residential program is a program that is designed to assist income qualifying applicants with health and safety repairs to their homes. The program has evolved over the last decade, with the most significant changes occurring around 2022. What began as a $7,000 grant award which was funding that allowed people to fix their properties. We know that construction prices have increased throughout the years, especially with the COVID area. This program has evolved to allowing residents to be awarded up to $100,000 for health and safety home preservation repairs. The initial idea behind the program was to help residents that have more obligations than resources, allow them to reallocate those funds to other needs while we repaired their property. For example, if you had a leak in your roof and your annual taxes were due, what do you think people are likely going to do? They're probably going to say, I'm going to fix my roof. I don't want to get rained on, and allow their taxes to kind of just be forfeited. They'll forfeit the tax payment and fix their roof. So the city and the CRA wanted to address that challenge by saying, you pay your tax payment, and we'll make sure that you have a roof that is well for you and your property. Make sure we preserve the bones of the property, but also help you out as the resident and constituent. So it's not only roof repairs that we provide. There are multiple services that we provide through the Fix It Up program. So we do roof replacements, AC repair, electrical repair, flood mitigation. We provide emergency services and storm response, flooring, plumbing, security measures. It's a place-saving program, and it also allows our constituents to age in place. If you have your phones out, you can also scan this QR code. This takes you to a direct link to our Fix It Up program, and allows you to see this. This is the front page of the brochure that you see on the screen, but you can also see the full brochure on our website, on the CRA website, and also see the application, learn the application process, and kind of get more details about our program. We've liberated this program over the years. And what I mean by liberated is This is a homeowner occupied program, meaning that the individual must be living in the property, it must be homesteaded, and it should be their primary residence. However, throughout the years, I noticed that there were a lot of residents in the Lincolnville community who were not living in their properties because they didn't have the funds to repair it pending a storm, like specifically after Hurricane Matthew or Irma, they may have experienced flooding. So what I did was I went to the commission and said, hey, what if we repaired these properties for the people who once lived in their home and they want to return to Lincolnville, they just don't have the money to do it. And I was able to get buy-in from our commission to say, if they have intention to move back and we're able to spend the dollars to improve their property and get these people back into their space, let's do that. So what we do now is have those particular residents sign an affidavit saying that this is their primary residence. They have intention to live in the property once it's repaired, and then we are able to go in, improve the property, and then they can come back and live in that property again. So this program, so where does the architectural or historic preservation come into play? So I began working with a consultant back in 2022 to establish guidelines that would help guide and hopefully encourage stakeholders in Lincolnville to be more thoughtful when improving the exterior of their property. We also wanted to encourage developers, new developers that were coming into Lincolnville, building new construction, to think about the historic character and the integrity of the property, or the integrity of the character of Lincolnville. We were hoping to preserve the historic character in Lincolnville. We have lots of shotgun houses, the Victorian style houses, Queen Anne architectural styles. And we weren't able to get the commission to buy in to making the guidelines what we call standards, or regulating the way people improve their properties. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But we did get the commission to adopt the guidelines as an appropriate approach. And a reference guide for improving properties, and also for working with new developers for infill properties in Lincolnville. The guidelines focus on some of the most significant structurally appropriate pieces of Lincolnville, or the historic components of the structures in Lincolnville, like the front porch, which is a really big thing in Lincolnville. Most of the properties have front porches. We focused on the roof pitch, the siding, and of course the windows, what those windows look like in those historic properties. And although we were unable to enforce the guidelines as a standard practice, we do use the guidelines when residents are matriculating through the Fix It Up program. So that means if you want to receive grant awards up to that $100,000, you are required to use our architectural guidelines. It is a part of the grant funding criteria. So if you need new windows, we do go in and we provide the historic preservation style. Whatever those windows were before is what we go back to. We also engage our historic preservation officer. Ms. Julie Courtney is a part of our approval process. So as we get those work orders and scopes of work for the approval of our Fix It Up program, that document is routed through the Historic Preservation Office so that they can also chime in and provide feedback on what the appropriate direction is for improving that property from a historic preservation perspective. This slide is just a chart that kind of shows you the program investment throughout the years. And then it also is an opportunity for you all to kind of understand the Community Redevelopment Agency's return on interest in investing in these properties. So our ROI is the stabilization of the community, seeing the long-term residents age in place. Also, the investment helps to increase the tax value, which is directly reflected in the community redevelopment area's tax increment fund. So I'll talk a little bit about what our TIF is. So the tax increment is literally how we fund CRAs. Aside from grant funding that I go after to try to help assist in funding some of these projects and programs, the tax increment fund is an opportunity, is the trust fund that funds CRA. So for instance, we'll use Lincolnville as an example. The Lincolnville CRA was established in 2013. So that would be considered our base year. In 2013, if a homeowner's property tax was $500, That's their property tax. In 2014, if their property taxes increased, we'll say by $5. Every year after that, that increment goes into a special pot to fund projects and programs within that specified special district. So every year that property taxes go up, we take the incremental value or the incremental amount. The $500 that their taxes were in 2013 continues to fund any taxing source or a taxing area that it already funded. And then the new money, new increases goes directly to the CRA. So $500 in 2013, now it's 2025. If that homeowner's taxes are now $2,000, $500 goes to where it always went, and the new $1,500 goes into the trust fund to fund projects and programs within the Lincolnville CRA. In addition to the ROI, we are preserving the historic elements of the contributing structures. Properties that may be heading into, say, a circumstance like demolition by neglect, they become a product of our program where we're able to intervene, improve that property, ensure that it stays within the community as an asset and not become another blighted structure. So that is how what we would call our return on interest for improving these properties. This next slide just kind of shows a few of the homes that we've invested in throughout the years. These are some of our more recent properties. Out of respect for the integrity of our homeowners, I'm not displaying any interior property photos, but we also, something went away, I'm sorry. Did the presentation go down? Are you all able to still see it?
No, we're seeing your notification for some reason. I don't know if that's just your active screen. Maybe if you just...
Let's see.
Jamie, did it minimize? Try maximizing it at the bottom.
I did. It's completely gone. I don't know how that happened. Sorry about that. We'll get right back into it. Give me 1 second here.
No worries. While we're waiting for that, I'll just remind everyone if you have some questions, we've already got a couple in there, but please feel free to put them in the chat. We'd be happy to get to that. And, especially if anyone's wondering if this, how do you kind of get this working in your community? Feel free to ask us basic questions about a CRA and how to get it directed to do some preservation work. Feel free to put that in there. No question is a dumb question. So we look forward to having that conversation with you.
Thank you, Jenny, for the buffer. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm not displaying the interior of some of the properties or any of the properties because we do value the integrity of our homeowners and we want to keep their privacy private, but we do complete lots of interior repairs to these properties. So one of the most interesting photos on this page, I think, is the one on the far right. And it looks like, let me minimize this. I'm sure what you're seeing is what I'm seeing. There you go. The photo on the far right is our response to a storm that we had last summer. This was an emergency repair from last October, I'm sorry. I got a phone call over the weekend that a Lincolnville resident had been displaced from their property because a tree had fell on their property during a storm. By Monday, we were out there removing this tree and getting the property stabilized so that the homeowner could move back in. She is now going through our program for additional property improvements with historic preservation components to the property. So we also provide flood mitigation efforts to assist residents who we know Lincolnville floods. So we do offer opportunities to help lift. We're working hand in hand with our Chief Resiliency Officer, Ms. Jessica Beach, on trying to utilize some of our Fix It Up grant funds as a supplement for the FEMA program that they've established in the Public Works Department to help also raise properties. And that is also a historic preservation effort because if we lose the property to water damage, we lose the property forever. I do want to use this opportunity too to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see that we face in Lincolnville when we are trying to get residents to buy into this program. When you apply to be a part of the Fix It Up program and you are an approved applicant, once we invest those dollars, we do require a lien be placed on your property. There is a lot of apprehension because residents immediately assume that the government wants to steal their property, especially some of our senior residents. They have lots of concern just because of the history and relationship with government practices. We totally understand that. So we work really diligently to try to explain to them that the lien is not there for the city of St. Augustine to come in and take their property, but it is there to protect the interest that we've invested. And it's also an opportunity for us to say, please do not sell your house. So it is a 20-year lien, or up to 20 years, depending on the amount of money that we invest in the property. If a resident does receive that full $100,000, it's a 20-year lien that just says that you cannot sell your property for 20 years. In the event that you do decide to sell that property, then you would be responsible for paying back an amount to the city of St. Augustine. And that amount does reduce over the years evenly. So if you have a 10-year lien, then you'll see $10,000 will fall off every year that of that property. So you would only owe a certain portion of that that grant money back. If you don't sell your property, then you never owe us a dime. So we use that as a way to kind of keep those residents in Lincolnville. The other challenge is that Lincolnville is not a historic preservation district. So what happened throughout the years is some properties have unfortunately been improved without historic preservation consideration. Some people have done things without matriculating through our hardboard. They've improved their property and put windows in. And so we have to kind of go in and do after the fact variances to try to get those properties back into a historic preserved state. And there are some pros and cons, of course, to Lincolnville not being a historic preservation district. One of the challenges is, we do have buy-in from residents. Some of them do want to see Lincolnville be considered a historic preservation district. But the challenge with that is that then the cost for repairs would increase, and we may see those long-term residents or those people that have long-term history of living in Lincolnville, we may see them end up having to leave the community because they're not able to cover the cost for the materials that it would, whatever that cost would be for them to be able to preserve their properties. Imagine having to pay $200 for a doorknob because on your property there's this distinct version of a doorknob that we require you to put back on your house if you change a door out, or the cost of windows. So it's not a historic preservation district. We don't have that overlay on the Lincolnville area. So it kind of is a challenge. And then we also have no control over what new construction looks like in Lincolnville, which is where the architectural guidelines come in place, and building those partnerships with developers in hopes that they will be considerate of the new structures that they build. And then I guess as a historic preservationist, you all should know, we don't want new infills to look like old or historic properties. We should be able to tell the difference between time frames. So I always say we want it to look like sisters, not twins, or cousins, not twins. So just being considerate of the porches or the windows or the roof pitch that you put in, so it doesn't look so modern, and that we can protect the integrity of Lincolnville.
I just have to say, I love how you put that, Jamie. That just really hits the nail on the head.
I'm glad you like that. Let's see, next slide. So let's get into another, what I call a very successful, I'm tooting my own horn, I guess, I don't know, but another very successful historic preservation program, and also in Lincolnville, is our institutional rehabilitation program. And this program is specifically for institutions in Lincolnville. You'll see that we work on a lot of churches because there are a lot of church institutions, but it is not definitive for churches. It's for any institution. So that could be museums, schools, neighborhood structures. But because there are so many historic churches in Lincolnville, they seem to be the ones matriculating through our program the most. And we love preserving these very important historic structures in Lincolnville. So this on the screen, you'll see St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church, and we have the sanctuary and the parsonage photoed here, pictured here. We've done completed three projects to date. There's no funding cap for the institutional rehab program. We base funding off of the need for the structure and the ability to fund the project. So it is my job to budget every year, very challenging role here, to budget each year what we need to fund some of these projects. I do have to be very strategic. Sometimes I have to ask applicants to wait because another project may need funding more because of the challenges that their structure is facing. We accept applications beginning October 1st through December 31st each calendar year. So we're currently in our application acceptance period. We've received so far 3 applications this year, and it's not even November yet. We've contributed approximately about $4 million since 2020, since the program was established. So the program was established, predates my time here at the city, but our inaugural institutional rehabilitation program project was began in 2021. So I'm going to skip through that slide. This is St. Joseph Neighborhood Center. We spent only $200,000 helping this project, but I want to shout out the Sisters of St. Joseph because they were very strategic in their funding initiatives. They were able to get a $1 million grant fund from the African American Cultural and Historic Grant from the state of Florida, and they improved what was a very blighted structure in Lincolnville. This used to be a school that the Sisters of St. Joseph's was an African American Catholic school. And it was a blighted structure for the last over 20 years. And they've done an excellent job of improving it. We were only able to invest in the windows and some of those facade features. And we provided a $200,000 grant to them. But the sisters took the bull by the horns, and they really improved this property. It is an excellent asset to the community, and now it is a neighborhood center. And they do have facilities in there where the community can use it. However, it is more so for a program that they established, which helps single mothers, and it is in Lincolnville. This is one of my favorite projects that we recently improved and did had, of course, many historic preservation elements here at the Fountain of Youth Elks Lodge, which is located at 100 Washington Street. We actually just completed this project last month and had the ribbon cutting. On the left, you'll see the original, what the structure looked like before we came in. The middle photo is the current version of the Elks Lodge. We did add a front porch at what you'll see upstairs, and we did have to have that approved through our Historic Architecture and Review Board, and it was approved. One of my favorite components and and historic preservation efforts for this project was the jalousie windows. And in that top right photo, you can see what we displayed during the ribbon cutting, a very famous photo of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Robert B. Hailing, and I believe Reverend Abernathy at a press conference at the Elks Lodge back in 1964. And you'll see those jalousie windows in the background. And we strategically placed that photo in front of the jalousie windows in the Elks Lodge, showing the preservation of that iconic photo. So this project was $1.4 million, partially funded also by the African American Cultural and Historic Grant of the state of Florida. And that was a grant that I provided the administrative services on. And actually, I still have one final report that I have to submit. So when I hang up with you guys, I'm going to write it. And then the bottom photo is just our mayor, Miss Tyson, who is a great friend of Dr. King Centered, and members of the Elks Lodge cutting the ribbon to their new facilities. First Baptist Church, our inaugural institutional rehabilitation program, $1.3 million, completely funded through the Lincolnville Community Redevelopment Area TIF Fund. This was it was my first real project coming to the city in 2020 for institutional rehab, I should say. We had to be really strategic with this project because we did an addition. We did need to provide some ADA accessibility. What the church found was that they were having, their parishioners, for one, are aging, and they were having challenges getting into the church with the stairs. So we did add an elevator addition to First Baptist Church. And we wanted to be really intentional about how that addition looked and making sure that it blended very well with the structure of the church. And so I think we did a really good job. I actually have a video I'm going to share with you, and I'll hit play, and then you can see for yourself.
First Baptist Church, established in 1872, is the inaugural institutional rehabilitation project for the city of St. Augustine, Lincolnville Community Redevelopment Area. This project, which commenced in October 2020, was a two-phase historic preservation project. With a project budget of $1.2 million, the project scope included structural stabilization, stained glass window restoration, mechanical and electrical upgrades, HVAC installation and weatherization, restroom facility restoration, interior and exterior painting, flood protection, and finally, the installation of an ADA compliant elevator. The installation of the elevator was a matter of critical importance to this rehabilitation project as it allows access to the historic structure, accommodating those with disabilities, the aging parishioner population, and creates place-saving initiatives. This particular method of access allows the church to continuously be used as it was intended, accommodating the size of a standard casket for funeral services. The project team was intentional in our efforts of designing the addition where the elevator is housed, careful to ensure that the architectural integrity of the historic structure was not compromised. With the project completion and ribbon cutting occurring in September 2023, the church is now reopened to the public and has resumed its role in the community as a safe haven, a valuable community resource, and a preserved historic landmark.
Sure you didn't want to see that again. All right, so future projects for the institutional rehabilitation program. Currently, we are working on Greater St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church. We have a $1.1 million budget allocated for this project. A little over $600,000 of those dollars is also from the African American Cultural and Historic Grant at the state of Florida. The remaining portion of those funds are supplemented by the Historic Area CRA fund. And this project will be similar to that of First Baptist. Unfortunately, we are not able to fund an elevator in this church at this time, but there could be a phase 2 at some point to assist in helping their parishioner base and maintaining the usage of this sanctuary and safe haven. This is another one of my favorite projects. This is Trinity Independent Methodist Church. We've currently spent about $300,000 in improving this space. Most of those dollars have been spent on design. We anticipate that the construction of the project will be a total cost of about $2.1 million. This project is so important because right now this church does not have a certificate of occupancy, meaning that no one can utilize this space. So the pastor and the parishioner or trustee base, we've been working with them very closely on trying to improve this space so that we can get it back open. One of the things that we work with our applicants on is specifically for institutional rehab is how they will maintain the space once we go in and invest and then we pull out, because as a CRA, we don't have dollars to maintain anything, especially for private properties. But we are not legislatively able to maintenance anything. So we work with them on what's your plan once we're done. We've talked to this pastor about hopefully opening the facilities for tours. People are very interested in the history, so maybe people can go in and he can offer tours. Another revenue stream would be weddings or hosting events in the space so that he can have a revenue stream to ensure that he maintains the investment that we put into the property. All right, so let's wrap up. In conclusion, we have worked really diligently here at the City of St. Augustine and specifically in the CRA to establish and deploy some really important place saving and preservation programs and initiatives. The programs have been so successful in historic Lincolnville that I am proud to say that we are developing similar programs in our newest CRA, the West City Community Redevelopment Area. with hopes of implementation specifically of a residential historic preservation program early next year. I'm actually going before the commission on October 27th to present the proposal. And if we get 5 yays, then we'll be working on the application process to deploy this program in January. I mentioned it earlier, but I feel like it's important that I say again that as planning professionals, I feel that we have a responsibility to preserve and stabilize our communities and right the wrongs that predate our time as professionals. We also need to understand that preservation is not just about the preservation of buildings. We also are not only preserving and saving structures, we are preserving culture, we are preserving history, and we're preserving the stories that shape a community and dictate our future. So with that, I will yield my presentation, and I am available if you have any questions. And my contact information is also on the bottom right-hand side of the screen if anyone wanted to reach out to me personally. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I just can't say how impressed I am with everything that you've been able to lead and do for St. Augustine. And just as a plug for those of you who think St. Augustine gets a lot of money from tourism revenues or property tax dollars, it's a 10 or 12 square mile city with 14, 15,000 residents.
Yep, very
So
small
it's a
town.
small but mighty town, and its staff really work very, very hard to get these programs going and get them in the right direction. So continue to commend your work, Jamie, as well as the city and your friends. I see some of you there. Julie's on here, I think. So keep up the hard work. I guess for some questions, I'll throw one out there to get us started, although we do have a question about windows in the chat. Um, I'm curious if you've been able to measure how successful the Fix It Up program has been to keeping people in their home, as opposed to, the influx of Airbnbs or people just wanting to leave and go
Right.
off to different areas. Have you been able to see that that's made a steady improvement?
I think so. So how we gauge it, Jenny, is by the amount of people that actually matriculate through our program.
Mhm.
And early on, one of the reasons why we increased the value of the grant was because, one, feel like we had touched the majority of the people who would qualify for our grant in Lincolnville. So we have seen kind of it stabilize where people that were leaving before, they're still in Lincolnville. And I feel like as we increased the value of the grant, we started to see more of people saying, oh, well, I was going to sell, but if I can get $100,000, then I'm going to stay. And so I think that, that yes, through the program, we have seen people, feel like they want to remain in the community if they can improve their property. You got to think about the integrity of it. Imagine being in like a small shotgun house on ML King, and then someone comes in and builds or improves, what we call mini mansions over here. And you're like in your little, shotgun style home, where the roof is kind of dilapidated. And it's like, why would I want to be next door to somebody? And then my taxes are going up too. So, if we're able to go in and assist these people, residents with this, it does change the trajectory of people staying there. They want to remain.
That's excellent. That's excellent. There was a question that we had in the chat from Doug. I think you did kind of touch on it, but just to be clear, would a historic window restoration qualify as a need in and of itself? Or how would that come into play if, you had some old aluminum windows, but we know they originally had, 2/2 or 6/6 wood windows. How would you go through that as part of the process? And can you do that with building codes?
So to answer the initial question, no, it is not a home need, so to speak. We're not just going to go in with the Fix It Up program cannot just say, oh, you need historic windows and we're going to come in. What typically occurs, and what our experience has been throughout the years, is someone probably is having issues with weatherization in their home where, it's drafty. The windows are 50 years old. They've never had them changed out or even repaired in any way. And so when we go in to replace their windows, now when we replace them, we're going to replace them with historic preservation in mind. We're not going to put just anything back. We're not putting in cheap, windows, just going to Home Depot. We're going to use the historic preservation method to replace those and restore that property. So it's not necessarily a need, but if we run into a situation where windows already need to be replaced, then the HP effort is, we accomplish that through historic preservation efforts.
Great, great. Did I see a hand? I know someone would like to, we'd like to get your email address again, if you don't mind sharing that or typing that in the chat.
I will type it in the chat, and it is J Perkins, Perkins, at citystaug.com. And I will put it in the chat, so if anyone wants to.
Thank you.
Send
And I know that you're also very involved in sharing your work with the statewide entity, the Florida Redevelopment, FRA. What does that stand for?
Florida Redevelopment Association.
Oh, association.
Yeah, and it is members from all over the state of Florida. We have over 220 community redevelopment agencies and areas throughout the state of Florida doing much of this very good work as well. There are a lot of them are doing some great things. We just had our annual conference the earlier part of this month, and I was able to go down to West Palm Beach and see some of their historic preservation efforts. Anybody familiar with the Sunset Lounge? They are currently improving that space. Was that one of the 11 to save, Jenny, at one point?
Yes, it was.
It was, yeah.
Also got an award.
Yeah, congratulations. It looks amazing. The work that they're doing. Gina is the project manager. She's a powerhouse.
Yes.
And we were having a little competition during the conference this year because she was like, see, we're doing churches too. Because they were down for our conference a couple of years ago. And they're doing excellent work. So the Redevelopment Association is an opportunity for, like any other professional association, where we can bounce ideas off of each other, learn what other CRAs are doing, what they're getting right, and deploy that in our communities. So,
and I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is because other than, you mentioned West Palm, and I am familiar with the work that they're doing, but comparatively to others in the state, how do you feel that are they integrating historic preservation as a goal in some way or another? Or do you feel like, it's still kind of an outlier that people aren't as familiar with how you can do that?
I think it's a challenge throughout the state, and I won't speak on West Palm specifically, but on all of our communities. I think that in the city of St. Augustine, we're very unique because we are the nation's oldest city, and I think that we have an obligation to kind of be the beacon for other communities and set a precedence of what it means to preserve the history of your communities and your neighborhoods. So I think that we set that precedence in our community. I think a lot of communities are starting to catch on and say, like, these places matter. We need to preserve these stories. We need to preserve these areas, for generations to come. And so people are catching on. I think it's kind of becoming a new, I guess, a phenomenon. I think historic preservation has always been there, obviously, but the importance of it is kind of phenomenal now. And I think it's these very important lunch and learns, like what you all are doing here at the Trust, making sure that people are aware of the importance of it and engaging with the professionals in these planning positions. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I encourage anyone to come off mute if you want to join the conversation here, especially as I mentioned earlier, if you're not familiar with the CRA, or if you're more of a preservationist, how can you, bring this to your community or get your local leadership to adopt some of these same programs, or any other questions that you might have? Feel free to come off and share that with us. I just want to make sure we're not missing anybody. Okay. Well, I guess then, are there any other final tips or lessons learned that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, not at this time. I will say this. If you are looking to establish a community redevelopment area in your community, in your city, your municipality, I'm happy to assist with that. I'm available for questions if you want to kind of figure out how can I get something like this started. Granted, you don't need a community redevelopment agency or area to preserve history. There's funding all over to kind of help you with those projects and programs, but the CRA is definitely a great tool to use for preservation. I call it the heartbeat of our municipality because, when you think about public works or you think about solid waste, those are things that we need, that cities in my mind are obligated to do, but cities are not required to go in and invest in churches and museums. Like, we don't have to fix those things up, but for us to have the ability and the funding to do those things is kind of the heartbeat of your local government. So establishing a CRA is something that you should definitely think about. If you're in Florida, a lot of states are not utilizing this tool anymore. They're going in different directions. But the first step is to do a finding of necessity. That finding of necessity is basically a strategic plan, and it's a study that you go out and you review that community. There are several criteria that the state requires in order for you to say if a community qualifies as a CRA. And what you do is, if you find these specific criteria items, I think you need to have at least 7 of them. West City had 9, and when we did our study, and we had to take it obviously before our commission, we get approval from our governing county, which in this case is St. Johns County, and then we have to write the CRA strategic plan. Anything that's not in your CRA plan, you cannot do it. So we have to also be very diligent when we're writing the plan, and we make sure that we incorporate, we actually have a historic preservation statement that we use in all of our plans now as we develop them. And I'm happy to share that with you all too. But the historic preservation statement allows us to have what I call wiggle room. So if there isn't any specific language about a project or program that talks about historic preservation, the statement is in the plan, which gives us an opportunity to bring any special project back before the commission for special consideration so that we can preserve those, the history of a community structurally with that historic preservation element. So yeah, doing the finding of necessity, establishing the CRA plan, getting those TIF dollars, and going out and improving your community using the resources that CRAs provide.
Excellent. And while you were speaking, we had a question. What can CRA funds be used for? Is there a limitation? I mean, obviously, I know that once you establish your finding necessity and the plan, whatever you want to spend money on has to be in the plan. But does the state say what you can and can't even have in the plan?
There are some regulations, so we can't spend money on events and festivals, things like that. But any capital improvement, any program or project that is definitive to historic preservation, improvement of the community, the removal of slum and blight, which are legislative terms in the CRA legislation. They literally say slum and blight. I do not like those terms, but it's legislative language. So the mitigation of those things in CRAs are what dollars are primarily for. The only things that are really called out specifically that you cannot spend dollars on are like events and celebration, or I should say marketing, things like that. Like we can't do marketing of private things, but we can market CRA initiatives. And so those are the things that you can't spend dollars on, but everything does have to be identified in the plan, which is what I was saying earlier, is about being strategic as we build out the criteria and the language that comes into that CRA plan. It's like a comp plan, really, where you're identifying exactly what you want to improve. And you get a lot of that through public engagement. So as we were building out our plan specifically for West City, which is our newest CRA established in 2024, we began talking to residents, talking to stakeholders, talking to business owners. What is it that you want to see? How can, if the CRA is established, how would we spend those dollars? And they began kind of sharing with us things that they wanted to see in West City. And we put all that information into the plan so that as that TIF fund grows and that money begins to, grow over the years, we'll have those dollars allocated toward those specific line items. So, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Shelby, does that answer your question? Do you want to ask
Shelby.
any?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I have just one other note before Larry, if you want to go ahead and start pulling up our closing slides. But Jamie, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this whole Senate Bill 180. I don't want to call it a fiasco, but it's really had some shattering effects on communities in their planning efforts by, saying that anything is overly burdensome can no longer qualify as an ordinance or be adopted. And I know St. Johns County had their comp plan rejected. Are any of those issues right now affecting the CRA, or do you anticipate that they will? Or since it's voluntary participation, hopefully it doesn't matter?
Right. So yeah, I've been staying up to date on what's been going on, and actually one of our consultants that we work with very closely was helping to write the comp plan for St. Johns County, and so we spoke in detail about that rejection and how that has just been really detrimental to the work that the county is trying to do. And so no, the CRA itself has not been impacted, not as of yet. We don't see futuristically any concerns. But you just never know. You just never know. I mean, I don't know if people who may not follow community redevelopment agencies, but we were under fire just last legislative session. We thought we were going away. We thought CRAs were, about to be, expired and sunset throughout the state. Thankfully, the association FRA came together with the Florida League of Cities, and there was just a lot of people that kind of pushed back. And thankfully, the omnibus bill that they were pushing it in got, tabled. But that's not to say that, next session we're not back on the chopping block. You just never know. And I think that's why it's so important that while we have these resources and while we're doing the good work, we do the good work, because you just never know when our time is going to be up and we're not going to be able to provide these resources to people. So,
and get your local officials involved as well as your state representatives. Give them an opportunity to come to a ribbon cutting or a special event so that they feel engaged and responsible for these successes.
And that they are aware. One of the things that we found out, and I'm sorry, Jenny, to cut you off, but one of the things we found out is a lot of people just don't know the work that we're doing. I heard one legislator say during the session, well, I wrote through a CRA and I didn't see anything that they did. And it's like, it might be under the ground. It could have been a project that was for utilities, and it could, you might be riding on top of it, and just because it's not big and flashy and it's not a church unveiling doesn't mean that the work is not being done. So including your elected officials in the process and making them aware of the work that you're doing, I think that goes a really long way. So I try to keep our elected officials very, very busy here in St. Augustine. Come to the ribbon cutting, so.
Good for you. All right, well, we are coming to the end of our session today. I want to reiterate how much we appreciate you joining us. We had about 40 people with us today, and so I appreciate your time. But we do want to close it out, and I do want to let you know that if you aren't a member of the Florida Trust, please join us. Also, if you or your company is interested in being a sponsor, we're working on next year's syllabus to develop our Lunch and Learns, and would love to have you as a sponsor. If you're interested, please contact Laura Glenn here at the Florida Trust. She will work with you on that. And the other thing is this year we are having this month rather, we are having back-to-back Lunch and Learn sessions. So we're going to have one on October 30th, a special one for Summit for Halloween. It's going to be Preserving Historic Cemeteries with Nigel Rudolph of the Florida Public Archaeology Network. And I know he's an exciting speaker, and we're going to have a great talk about cemeteries. So if you haven't registered for that, please go ahead and sign up for that. You can find the link in the chat to get registered. Again, it is free. And finally, for all registrants for today's Lunch and Learn, you'll receive an email in the coming days with any handouts as well as the presentation slides itself. So thank you again for joining us. Thanks for keeping up and hanging in there, and have a great rest of your month. Bye.